Okay, so what we're gonna look at today is this homework on GDP. So we're gonna determine if it's counted and what is it counted as. So the first one, I bought 2 6-packs of Diet Dr. Pepper. Is it counted or not counted? Counted, what is it? Consumer, it should be C. I bought a Sony TV. Consumer. I bought a 1972 Volkswagen Bug. Used, it does not count towards GDP. I put $1 in a blind man's cup. Transfer, it's a gift, that does not count towards GDP. I buy 10 shares of IBM stocks.
Financial transaction?
It's a paper financial transaction. Anything where you're not, because when you bought that share, did you get anything tangible? No, if there's nothing tangible coming with that, it will not be included in GDP. So I pay a housekeeper $50. Am I paying something to do something? Is that a good or service? It's a what? Service, so does it count? It is consumer. I ran short on cash, so I did my own housework the next week.
Non-market?
It's non-market activity, so it's me being cheap and doing my own stuff on my own. Okay? If I bought a Roomba, would that count? It would count as what? C. Okay? Ford Motor Company buys a new assembly line. I. Ford Motor Company buys new tires for new models. Intermediate good, so it's INT. I paid my income tax, $500 to the government. Okay, is that consumer? No. Okay, it's a transfer payment.
What's that?
Federal income, the federal government buys MX missiles. G. I flew to Tokyo on Japan Airlines, it cost $1,200. It's C, it's consumer spending. I bought a new dress for $190. Loaned $1 to Mark, just friends, no contract. T, I paid $50 for a new but hot buy. Hot means stolen. N, I paid $500 in child support. T, that's a transfer. Salem Sportswear purchases 1 ton of cotton fabric for shirts. It's an intermediate. I bought a new computer for a graphic design co. For this company, this is I. Okay, don't worry, we are gonna look at this a little bit more. So we're gonna do another one. We're gonna do this collectively as a class, this one. And the more we do this, the more we get better, because we're applying what is going on. Okay, we are gonna get better at this. So, this is another worksheet we will be doing on GDP. Okay, so, the directions. For each of the following, we will determine, will it be counted to GDP? If it's counted, we will tell if it's consumption. That means consumers are buying it, investment, business is buying it, the government is buying it, net exports. Or we'll say, is it rent, is it wages, is it interest, or is it profit? And if it's not counted, we'll explain why. So let's look at this first one. Paris Hilton earned $750 working in a local grocery store. Does that count towards GDP or not? It counts. Why does it count? Wages. Coco purchases a brand new Toyota Tundra made in San Antonio. Does it count towards GDP? It counts because what is it? Consumption. The United States Marine Corps invades Austin, Texas, and in the process spends $5 billion. Austin surrenders. Does it count?
Government spending.
It counts. What is it? Government spending. On vacation, Hugo Chavez purchases a goofy hat at Agita. He then declares himself the supreme leader of Tomorrowland. Does this count or not count? It counts. What does it count as? Consumption. My father-in-law receives a monthly check from the oil pumped off his property. It counts. What does it count as? Land. Intel spends $300 million building a semiconductor factory in San Jose, Costa Rica. Is this in America? Is this within America? So does that count towards our GDP? So this doesn't count to GDP. This would count as what? Would count as GNP. Okay. Intel spends $300 million building a semiconductor factory in San Jose, California. It counts. What does it count as? Investment. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair decides to start a boy band and purchases a used Volkswagen in a Eurovan in which he will tour South Texas. It doesn't count. Why not? It's used. Lindsay Lohan buys a new John Deere tractor for her organic farm in New Hampshire. It counts. What does it count as?
Investment.
Okay, we don't know if she has a business, right? We don't know if she's Lindsay Lohan and Farms, but we could say it could be consumption or it could be investment, right? Do we need more information for this one? Yes, does she have a real farm? John Deere tractor receives payment from Lindsay Lohan's for a new tractor. It counts. What does it count as? It's a business getting money. Profit. Mr. Mayor, which I stole this from my friend from San Antonio, receives $500,000 in stock dividend. It doesn't count. Why does this not count? It's a paper financial transaction. And when someone hands you over a check, have you done something for them? No. When they did that stock dividend, did they give you like a little cushy little koozie or something like that saying thank you for buying the stock? We give you some, no, right? They just give you that paper. So Mr. Mayor, my friend from San Antonio, buys a $500,000 house that was built 50 years ago. It burns to the ground the next day, uninsured. Does it count? It doesn't count. Why not?
It was not built this year.
It was not built, so what does that mean?
Used.
It's used. Northeast ISD, where I used to work in San Antonio, built a new high school. In Canada, parents are angry because of the lengthy commute.
Do any of the ones that have stuff written on them?
No, those are my keys. Will you put them to the side? If there's, okay, what is this one? Does it count? Does it count? No, it doesn't count. Why not? Because it's in Canada, and this would only count towards what? Counts in GDP, GNP. Russian President Vladimir Putin orders a dozen Krispy Kreme glazed donuts and has them shipped to the Kremlin. He later hides in his office and eats the entire dozen without sharing. It counts, but what does it count as? Net exports. After leaving office, George W. Bush clears 50 acres of cedar on his ranch in Crawford, Texas. And he plants native live oaks. When he sells the pollution permits to Al Gore, so pollution permits to his live oaks that are on his ranch, right? So that Al Gore can sequester the carbon emissions from his SUV. So does this count? Did he sell him something? Yes. What is Al Gore going to be able to get? Carbon monoxide, quote, right? Stuff from the, does that count? Is there something being a transaction? He's selling him a permit and he's gonna be able to collect all of this emission, right? Is there being something that's being traded. Yes, hot air, right? So does this count? It counts. What does it count as? Ranch.
Oh, rent.
What is this? Rent from that land. Okay, how do y'all feel about this one? Okay, what we're gonna be doing now is we're gonna be diving into GDP because GDP gets a little bit intense. And so what we're gonna start looking at is the different ways GDP is counted. So you are going to be getting a note set. 5. Okay, what this used to be, do y'all see how this looks like this, right? This used to be how we did our study guides, and then I would realize that people would go and they would read the book, and it was atrocious because I was making you read about math. And so then I realized, I was like, okay, instead of you doing it as homework, because I had to come back and reteach it every single time, I just decided we're just going to use it as notes. Okay? Are y'all okay with that? Yes? Okay, so we're going to look at the different ways we calculate GDP because I saw 2 different things on that notes I did, right? We looked at consumption, investment, government spending, net exports, right? And then also, I looked at a different approach. I was looking at the payments, right? From wages, from the land, rent, from profit. And so there are 2 ways that we can calculate GDP. The first one is the aggregate spending approach. And this one is C. What do we know is CS? Consumption plus I, which is what? Business, plus G, which is what? Government, plus XN, and this is my net exports. How does America's net exports look? Is it positive or is it negative? Negative, because we import a lot, right? So this one is the one that is most used. But there's another way that I could calculate GDP. I could take wages, plus rent, plus interest, plus profit. Do I have to write those words underneath it? No. Okay, so this is the income approach, but this one is the not most accurate because do people make money that they don't report to our government? Yeah. How many of you have ever babysat? Did you report that money to the government? How many, you didn't get any money? Oh my gosh, you were doing it out of the kindness of your heart. Okay, so most people, do they honestly report all their wages? No. Do people honestly report all the rent that they're paying? So the aggregate income approach is not the most accurate. So the only way we can get an accurate one is through the aggregate spending because a lot of times when people purchase stuff, what are you giving back? The product plus what? There's a piece of paper you get, a receipt, and what do most people do with that receipt? Throw it away. But is a business responsible for that receipt? Because does the business have to report everything that they sold? Yes. And so we have an accurate way to tell about consumer consumption. We have now an accurate way to tell about business investment because are they paying for that, those services? And so that's why they look at the aggregate spending approach as the most accurate one. So what we're going to look at is there is 2 different types of GDP. One is nominal, and you're like, what the heck? I've never heard that word before, nominal. None of y'all use that in your everyday vocabulary. Anytime I see the word nominal, I see the word I in there. Do y'all see that little I? And it immediately makes me think of inflation. Anytime I see the nominal GDP, it tells me about gross domestic product with inflation. And so this tells me the current price of an item. When I look at that item, a lot of you are like, oh, the price has gone up on this item, right? Inflation has occurred. But that price already, like when I go to the gas station today, And so what we're gonna look at is that we can start comparing prices to see the total impact of inflation. So what is the problem of using nominal? What is the problem of using nominal GDP? It overstates consumption. And the reason why it overstates consumption is because when you go buy that price of gasoline, let's just look at it today. The price of gasoline is $2.88. Last year was gas that high. Gas was $1.99 last year. So now if I total all of the gas totals, it looks like Americans are spending way more on gas, but are we? No, what has happened to the price? The price is because it's the nominal price, it's gone what? Up. And so I have to be able to compare that, but now if I look at that, if I say that we total that more people are paying $2 billion in gasoline, and last year they're only paying $1.5 billion, does it look like we're consuming more? Yes, but are we actually consuming more? Because what has happened to that price? It's gone up. Have y'all seen this with chips and toilet paper and everything across the board? And it looks like Americans are spending way more money, but are we spending way more money? And so that's what we're going to get down to, the nuts and bolts, and how to really compare. Are we actually purchasing more, or have prices just gone up? And so what is real GDP measure? Real GDP will measure a price on a fixed dollar. This fixed dollar is going to remove what?
Inflation.
It will remove inflation. Okay, and so what happens is that economists will go and say, okay, we're going to compare years to figure out what the rate of inflation is, and now we can look at items from last year to this year, and we can really see without inflation in there if prices stayed the same or did they change. Are we really consuming more? And so what we're going to do is we're going to create constants in our number to be able to determine the effects of inflation. And a lot of you are just like, what the heck? I promise you when you see the math, it'll make sense, okay? Just bear with me, because now y'all are like, what the heck are we talking about? We know that there's inflation, and which number is going to show me it? Is it the real or the nominal? The nominal. But when I do the real, and I'm going to do some math with you, I'm going to take out the effects of inflation to see, did prices really go up? Okay? So why is real GDP more accurate? It is more accurate because it holds the dollar constant. So have you ever had your grandparents or your parents say, when I was little we could afford gas for $1, or I could go to the movie theaters for $0.25? And so what economists will do is that they're going to take out the effects of inflation and be like, is the price really the same for movie attendance? Are we still paying the same price for chips, minusing inflation? And a lot of you are saying, no, what has happened to price? It's gone up. And what they do is they hold everything constant so we can really determine, are we having inflation? So why is a growing GDP good? It shows us that the nation is prospering, having economic growth. Okay, so right now, if I were to go back and look at last year's GDP, do you think our GDP was growing? No. And so that shows me, was our nation prospering? No, and this is why and you'll learn this in government, that our government was trying everything that they could do to open back our economy, right? Because what will happen to our GDP if we open back our economy? It'll grow. So in Texas, have we prematurely, compared to the rest of the nation, opened up our economies? Yes, they have opened it up. And so what has happened to Texas GDP? Has it grown? Yes. But when I look across the nation, has everybody's GDP really grown? No. Okay, so what is the best measure of an individual's well-being? It is called GDP per capita. And you probably remember this from, who did y'all have ninth grade for? Coach Poole, or who was the other person? Was it just Coach Poole taught it all? There was another person?
I think it was Miss Boyd.
Mr. Boyd? Miss Boyd, Miss Hughes Boyd, right? And they a lot of information where it took the GDP and they divided it by the amount of people in the area. The higher the GDP, the more well off a nation is. The lower the GDP per capita, the less well off. And you probably saw those, they did those atlas things, they talked about how many TVs and cars were in a nation, right? You don't remember ninth grade. You're like, that was so far ago, like my life has changed, I'm a new person. Okay, we'll forget about ninth grade. Okay, so what is the business cycle measure? The business cycle, y'all know it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, right? But this ups and downs is really GDP. And so when my economy's declining, that means what's happening to GDP? Is it increasing or decreasing? It's decreasing. So GDP is basically my business cycle. So at the peak, my GDP is at its highest. What is up with my unemployment? It's at the lowest. What is up with that inflation? The highest. In a recession, what is up with my GDP? It's declining, right? What is up with unemployment? It's increasing. What is up with inflation? It's declining. In a trough, what's up with unemployment? The highest. What's up with inflation? The lowest. Okay, so a recovery is when we're returning back to normal. So what would a recovery be? Would it be a recession or an expansion? A recovery is always expansion. Okay, so I know a lot of you are like, well, how do I calculate this? I'm gonna get to that today. Let's flip over to the other side. Alright, and it may look a little weird, but just bear with me. I just didn't want you doing this on your own, and we're gonna do these calculations together. So there's two ways GDP can increase, right? One is through increase consumption, right? This is the C plus I plus G plus XN. What's up? Okay. Okay, so this is the increase in consumption, and then the other one is the increase in price. Okay, what would y'all rather see? Consumption. Why don't y'all want to see an increase in price? Because you're paying more, and what's happening to what you're actually taking home? Are you getting more or getting less? Less. So most people like just to see an increase in consumption. They don't like to see this increase in price. Okay, and so what I'm going to show you today is how do we calculate GDP? Again, there is a statistician group that actually goes out, and they go out into each region, and they have people who are shoppers, and they shop every single month to create a market basket. And what they do is they go compare prices. They go and buy bread every month. They go and buy milk every month, and they take information on this so that every year we could go and compare. And so we're going to do little fictitious worlds where it's easy to do the math, okay? And so what will occur is for me to determine nominal GDP. Do y'all see that here? What? First off, what is nominal? I see that I. It tells me inflation, right? So for me to calculate nominal GDP, I take the quantity of the year times the price of that year. So here's my little chart, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to multiply. So 50 times 90, that gives me what? 4,500 and what? 50. 2 times 75, that gives me what? 150. 50 times 30, that gives me how much? 1,500. Now I total this all up. What is my total GDP for my little fictitious world in 2006? 6,150. But this is all done at its current price. So whenever you're asked to figure out nominal GDP, they'll give you some numbers, and all you do is you take the quantity times the price. and you total it all up. So now, I want us to look at 2007. I want us to figure out the nominal GDP, but I will take the quantity times the price. So when I'm doing this one, what is my 106,000, right? And then 2 times 100 is 200, and then 50 times 25, that gives me 1,250, is that correct? Okay, now I total this all up to figure out my nominal GDP for this year. It's 0, it's 5, it's 4, it's 7, right? Looking at that, just me looking at the prices, what do I automatically think? I was like, oh my gosh, in 2006, it was 6,150 for me to buy this, and now I look at it this year, it's 7. What do I automatically think about price? It's gone up. Has inflation occurred? But looking at this, was everything constant? When I looked at my quantities, were my quantities constant? Were my prices constant? And so that is why, is nominal GDP valid? No. That's why we're going to get to real GDP, and we're going to hold some stuff constant to be able to determine, did inflation really occur? So I need to determine for 2008. So how do I determine nominal GDP? What do? Multiply. So I multiply 65 times 100, that gives me what? And then 120 times 225, oh gosh. I should pick easier numbers. I just took what AP had as one of its a free response essay. So this is coming from a free response.
270.
Thank you. Okay, these are just not easy numbers to do in your head, but you can multiply, use your digits or something. 65 times 25.
1,625.
Now I total this all up. That's 5, that's 9, that's 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, 3, 8. So when I look across here, what does it look like that's happened? Prices have gone which way? Up. And we're just like, oh, that's inflation. Yes, but is it fair? Am I comparing apples to apples? No, because y'all see that the quantities are not the same and the prices are not the same. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do real GDP. And this one is more accurate. And so the definition of real GDP, this tells me in constant what? Dollars. And what does real GDP eliminate? Inflation. And so for me to calculate real GDP, I'm going to take the quantity of the current year times the base year. Okay, so I'm going to do a little chart because I didn't give you a little chart here. Okay, so I'm going to take the price of the base year, right? So my base year is always going to be my first year here. So I'm going to take 50 for the window washing. For baseballs, my price is going to be 2. And for hammers, my price is going to be what? 30. And then I'm going to take the quantity of the base year, right? I take the price and then I take the quantity of the current year. Should I even do the math for 2006? If I were to take the price of the base year times the quantity of that year, would it give me the same thing? Yes. Okay. So I'm immediately going to go to what year? What quantity? 2007. So I'm going to take the quantity of window washing, which is 100, and baseballs and hammers at 50. Now I'm going to multiply this across. So 50 times 100, that gives me what? 5,000. What does it give me for baseballs? 200. What does it give me for hammers? 1,500. I total all of that up, 0, 0, 7, 6. Now, let's compare this to that. Was this nominal GDP overstating inflation? Yes, but then when I put it in constant numbers and now I compare the base year to this, was inflation as bad? No. So do y'all get what real is doing? It's eliminating the inflation by giving us what? a base year. Do y'all understand it now? Did real inflation take down that inflation to not be as bad? Yes. So now I still have to do for another year, for 2008. But I'm gonna take the price from what year? What's my base year?
2006.
2006, and the price is 50, 2, and 30. And then I take the quantity from 2008, which is 100, 120, and 65. So when I take those and multiply across, none of y'all think this math is fun. You're like, I'm so excited to take inflation out and to see how, some of you are like, yes, I like this math. If you like this math, you will like actuary sciences. It is a type of math where people just, they get into numbers and they debunk numbers and how numbers are not really valid because of other things that are compressing on them. And that's what econ is a study of. And none of you are excited about that math. No, you don't like numbers. Some of you are just like, okay, I'm sorry. Basically, we're gonna do this math here, and it's gonna be the same math that I'm gonna do for a consumer price index and the inflation. I'm taking everything to a base because I'm trying to get what out? What am I trying to get out? Inflation. So now let's do this. Now that we set it up, this is 5,000, right? This is what? 240. This is what? Oh gosh.
1950.
Okay, thank you for doing that math. So this is 0, that's 9, this is, gosh, what's that? Wait,
It is 7,190.
Okay, looking at this, when I look, I need to find my phone because I don't know where my phone is. Oh, that's why I can't count because it's recording. I was like, where's my phone? I can't do that. Okay, but now when I look at these numbers, was that overstating inflation? And then when I brought it down to constant numbers, has there been much, this change was very dramatic, right? But now I look at it here, is it understating the effects? Yes, nominal inflation overstates, right? But when I put it in constant numbers, this is really the comparison. Are y'all okay? Okay, there's another thing I could calculate, and I think we end at 27. And we're gonna stop here, because I'm not gonna get to real GDP, okay? I'm gonna stop right there. How do y'all feel? Nominal gives me what? Inflation. Real calculates what out? And that's why we